Let's start. So losses, there's two types of loss that you might experience within doing any process. One being a normal loss and one being abnormal. This happens in any production. You start with certain ingredients, raw material, you apply your labor and your overheads, but you might experience loss. What you started with, sometimes it's not what you end up with. So if I may ask just general knowledge before we get into it, what do you guys understand to be a normal loss and an abnormal loss within a process? Just general, not trying to, you don't need to give me a textbook answer. From your understanding, what is a normal loss and also what's an abnormal loss in a process? And maybe give me an example to explain yourself. Anyone who would like to attempt? Normal loss versus abnormal loss. General knowledge, what do you guys understand by those concepts?
Well, can I try and define abnormal loss?
Okay.
I'll say abnormal loss is the type of loss which, let's say, in a process or in a production environment, abnormal loss is losses that can actually be controlled, that can be reduced, actually, that can be avoided. Okay, I think that's the right word. It's losses that can be avoided in a normal processing environment. Whereas normal losses that are part of the process, actually, I would say they can't be avoided.
Okay, yes. So maybe can you think of an example? Or anyone who would like to attempt. So then is saying that a normal loss, it's part of the process. It's part of the process where it's beyond your control. You're just going to incur that loss because of your production process. That's how it is. There will be a certain point where you experience loss. So I'm just saying, with that being said, can you guys think of an example of a normal loss? A process where you will just incur loss irrespective of what you do. Regardless of what you do, you will experience that loss. Can you guys think of an example?
Morning, teacher.
Hi, Tawanda.
Anyway, first of all, I thank you so much for doing the class, even if it's just two of us. I think like what Stan said, an example of like a normal loss, maybe if you're in production, or let's say you do sewing, sometimes you have those off cuts of materials, that you cannot avoid,
That's a brilliant one.
Yeah, and then your abnormal losses will be stuff that happens due to negligence. If like you're cutting, then you cut wrong, then the whole meter is wasted. Yeah.
Great. I like those examples. So I hope you guys can see the difference between the two examples. One is when you a tailor, there's certain off cuts that you have to lose of that material because of the dress or shirt that you're making, right? However, if let's say it happens that as a seamstress, you don't have the necessary skills, you cut that material wrong, that would be an abnormal loss. So let's go to the theory. There's a table here that compares and explains the difference between the two. So normal loss sometimes also referred to unavoidable loss. As we said, it's beyond your control. You can't avoid it. But on the other hand, abnormal loss, you can control it. So with the example of the seamstress, if you're not skilled enough to know how to cut the material in order to make a dress, go and learn, or you rather employ someone who's skilled so that there's no negligence, or if you get what I mean, someone who's skilled will know how to cut that material and make sure that we don't lose much of that material, because already there will be certain offcuts by doing this, by making this dress. So abnormal loss, you can control it, but then normal loss, you can't avoid it. And as we've mentioned, it's inherent. It occurs naturally as part of the process. You cannot avoid it. So there's more emphasis on saying that it's part of the process, you cannot avoid. But then the other hand, abnormal is the opposite. So normal loss does not indicate that you are having an ineffective process. It's normal, hence the word normal. But then the other one shows inefficiency, so hence the word abnormal, right? Other examples that we have is that maybe when you have a certain chemical product that you're making, sometimes chemicals, by their nature, when there's a certain force, heat that is applied to that chemical, it ends up doing what? Evaporating. You cannot stop that evaporation, especially if your end goal is to produce a certain liquid or whatever product that you will be producing that needs those chemicals, right? And then we spoke about the material. On the abnormal loss, as I've mentioned, employees can be careless, so you would have those abnormal losses. And sometimes you yourself, as a business owner, you bought an inferior quality. So you bought a material that you knew that it's not of quality. So as a result, there's a lot of offcuts that are abnormal, because the material keeps on tearing when you are trying to cut. So how you can avoid that is buying quality products or quality material. Okay, so basis of what normal loss and abnormal loss. Then we continue as to say, where in our quantity statement do we put this abnormal and normal loss? It is accounted normally, sorry for using normal too much, you put it in under your quantity statement under the section of outputs, right? So remember, under that section of outputs, you will show which units are completed for this process and also from the previous process, if there is any. Then that's where you will also indicate your normal loss and abnormal loss, then thereafter get your closing width. But with what we just said here, there's certain rules as usual. But before we get to those rules, and also those rules, they impact how you treat this normal loss under your quantity statement. And then first in, first out still comes with the specific rules that you must remember and know. Because once your inventory is valued under first in, first out, you have to consider those rules when it comes to your normal loss. So with this loss that we spoke about, whether normal or abnormal, you need to know that part of your production process, it might happen at the beginning. Like I said, it might be that the minute that you put in those chemicals under that environment, they just start evaporating. It might be at the beginning. So that's when the process is actually 0% complete, because at the beginning. Sometimes it might happen at the end. Once you have done your quality inspection, normal loss occurs. And another point where it might happen is during. So it means that your completion could vary from 0 to 100. So between 0 and 100, that's when the normal loss might happen. Still, they're using the example of chemicals evaporating during the process, depending on the environment, right? So two things that you need to note is wastage point and how much is this loss. Wastage point being, as I've mentioned, that it could happen at any stage, at the beginning, during, or at the end. Wastage point is where your normal wastage occurs within this process. So let's say during this whole process, normal loss occurs when you are 25% into this process. That means that when you're doing your quality inspection, 25% within this process, normal loss happens. So that's your wastage point, where normal loss occurs. How much is, it varies. That's the estimated size of saying that, let's say, if you are 25% into this process, you will then, after doing that quality inspection, at least 4% of what you've brought in at the 25 will be lost. 25% of your units at that point in time will be lost. So never confuse the percentages to think that 4% is the wastage point is the normal loss. No, just always think that once we're doing a question where there's loss involved, always look out to say, first, draw your line, your timeline or process line to say, okay, this is at the beginning, this is at the end, what happened, where do we do our quality inspection? That's the wastage point. They will tell you whether it's at the beginning, at the end, or during, right? Then thereafter, ask yourself, how much, what's the size, what's the estimated size that I will lose? Okay, please remember that because it's very important. By the time we get into the rules, I don't want you to get confused. Okay, rule number 1, in terms of determining the number of units subject to normal loss, is that these are the rules outside the valuation methods, first in, first out. So it says, if percentage of completion for your opening WIP, so percentage of completion for your opening WIP, maybe it's 65 or 75%. So your opening WIP within your current process will be 75% complete. So if that percentage is greater than or equal the wastage point, you then do what? You deduct the opening WIP from your input total. Too many words, too much English. So what is it saying? It's saying if there's a timeline, I'm just drawing it here. So I can't draw. Sorry about that. Excuse me. So if within the process, you find that your opening WIP coming from the previous process comes into this, you edit into this process, current process, and you are 75% complete, and you find that your wastage point was, let's say, 25%. Remember, wastage point is where you will lose your units. They say that you need to do what? You need to deduct your opening WIP from your input column total. You will see an example that illustrates this, but bear in mind, if your opening WIP percentage, completion percentage is greater than your wastage point, you have to deduct your opening WIP from your input. You will see why. Then rule number 2 is that if the percentage completion of your closing WIP, it's at the end, is smaller than the wastage point percentage, you deduct your closing WIP in your input column. So they say that if your closing WIP within this process after opening current all of those. If your closing WIP percentage, let's say it is 20% complete, if it's smaller than, your wastage point at the time might be 75%, you need to deduct this closing WIP from your input total column. As I've said, we'll do an example just now to illustrate what we just did now. So these rules are very important because they are irrespective of the inventory valuation. Please bear with me today, FYI, more theory, and then we'll do the question. So I just need to make sure you fully understand the rules. So let's go. So what are the possibilities out of these rules? Possibilities is that opening WIP might be deducted from your input column total. Closing WIP might be deducted from your input column total if they meet these two rules. Or neither of them will be deducted from your input, or both of them will be deducted from your column. So let's do an example. So now the following is available for can of worms, an organization that prepares a mixture used for fishing bait, and they use a single process and they use process costing. Great. So the opening WIP is 40% completed and it's 90,000 units. There are new units that we put into the production and they're about 200,000 units. Our closing WIP is 30% completed and we have 40,000 units. My loss is estimated at stage 5. You guys, we have stage 5. Eh? I just got a warning. Load shedding. Eh? Wow. And what was I saying? So our loss is estimated at 10% of the units. It's estimated as 10% of the units that have passed the wastage point. Okay. The 10% is the estimation of it's the size of the units that you will use. Okay? Then you are asked to calculate normal loss in the output column following this scenario. So you see from what we read, they didn't tell us where the wastage point is, but it told you the size of the wastage occurs at the beginning of the process. So maybe just to speak with you, in terms of the opening WIP, will it be deducted in the input column or not, based on the rule that you just will? What are your thoughts? Will it be deducted from the input or will it not be? Guys? Remember, the rule says if the percentage of the completion of your opening WIP is greater than or equal to your wastage point, you deduct the opening WIP from the input column. So now our opening WIP is 40% completed. And here they're saying wastage point is at the beginning. So will our opening WIP be included, be deducted from the input column or not? Hello?
So I was just working through it. I think we must deduct this one.
Okay, and the want you to might be.
Gotta come again?
Why do you want it to be deducted?
I want it to be deducted because the second rule says that if the completion is smaller at the first rule says if the opening is greater or equals to, then you deduct from opening WIP. But here it's not greater than, it's small. So gonna deduct from the opening whip.
Okay.
Have somebody else help me, guys, yo.
And others, what are others saying? So let's see, in terms of if it happens at the end from your input column. Remember we said opening whip, if the percentage of your opening whip completion percentage is greater than or equal to your wastage point, then you need to deduct it from your input column. That's what it said. So if wastage point happens at the end of the process, will the opening whip be deducted or not?
In that case, it shouldn't be deducted.
It should, right? It should be, because it shouldn't, because it's less than. Then let's take the closing one. Then we can move on and look at the solution. So the closing whip, they say that if it is smaller than the wastage point, then you deduct it from the input column. So the closing whip is 30%. Will you deduct if wastage point is 20% or not deduct? Please try.
You can't deduct.
You can't. Okay, you can't, right?
Yeah, because it's smaller than.
It's more. Yes, because your closing whip, it's more. It's not smaller than the wastage point. Cool. And then if the 30%, if it is, if the wastage point is on 35%, will you deduct or not? I need you guys to get familiar with this. I'm asking.
Yeah, you still won't deduct it because it's 35% is less than the 40% of your work.
The closing whip is 30.
Yeah, it's 30.
So, okay, it's 30, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. So we're working on the closing whip. Okay, great. So what you always have to start with before, because remember what I'm asking is at the input, but we still need to go to the output column. But what you firstly need to do, the first step is always start by calculating your input column first before you go to the normal loss. All right. So let's.
You guys need to pay it. Mabi. Mudono Badara, what you call? Mudono Badara machine. Let me give you my card.
Yeah. You're on speaker, eh?
Oh my goodness. Sorry, guys.
No worries. So let's look at the activity. So I'm saying that before you do the output column, because we still haven't answered the question, you need to look at the input column and then go to the output. So let's look, yeah. So the first thing that you need to do is to say, all right, so what is my input? Input, we recognize that the column will say opening whip and then what you put into production, correct? That's what you always put in when you're doing your opening whip. Then now you then need to start this whole question that I was asking you for yourself so that you can be able to calculate the normal loss. So when wastage happens at the beginning of the process, this is the timeline that I was talking about. You draw the timeline and say, I started at 0 and I end up with 100. Where is my opening whip? My opening whip, it is at 40%, correct? Then closing whip, it is 30% complete. Great. Where is my wastage point? You show it here. Wastage point, we said it's the beginning of the process, meaning it's at 0%. Then there it is. You see, you start writing my wastage point is 0%. Input, how many units did I start with? It's 290. It's the 90 from the opening to put it production, 290. Now you start the rules. Opening WIP is at 40%. The rule says that if my opening WIP percentage is more than or equal to the wastage point, then I will then deduct. So you say, is it greater than the wastage point? Yes, it is, because 40%, which is greater than the 0%. So it's a yes. Do I keep or I deduct? You deduct because that's what the rule says. So you will deduct 90,000 from where? From the 290. All right. Then you go into, so it will be 290 minus your 90,000. So it means that now you're working with 200,000 units that are subject to loss. You then continue and ask yourself, closing with 30%. The rule says if it's less than the wastage point, you then deduct. But if it's greater, you deduct. But if it's greater, you keep. So you ask yourself, is my 30% less than the 0%? No. Therefore, I keep. So as a result, I'm not including as part of the deduction portion. So now as a result, you then answer your units that are going to be lost is 10% of this 200,000. So total normal loss is 20,000. Any questions from what I just said? Do you guys follow how you should think or attempt the question? Do you guys, any questions from this table? To say that, firstly, lay it out, do your diagram to say 0%, 100%. Then you start saying, okay, what is the completion percentage for my opening WIP? What is my completion percentage for my closing? And where is my wastage point? Then, number of units that I'm starting with in my input. Your opening WIP, it's what you've put into production, great. Then you start this whole thing of saying, is it greater, is it less than, depending on the closing or opening WIP. Then you determine the units that are subject to loss. Then that's what you apply your normal loss to. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to move on then. No questions. I want to go to the end. I want to use a different one. Cool, let's go to D. When wastage point is at 85% complete, right? Same thing, draw your line, 0 and 100. Your closing WIP is 35% complete. The wastage point is 30%, sorry. Then the other one, wastage point is 35. And then your opening WIP, it's 40%. Right? So that again, where's my wastage point? It's at 35. My input, 290, because we calculated the 290,000. Then opening WIP is 40%. Is it greater than my wastage point? Yes, it is. Therefore, I will deduct it from my input column. So I'm working with 200,000 units that are subject to loss. Then you continue closing WIP. Is it less than the WIP percentage being 35%? Yes, it is. Therefore, I will deduct that 40,000 from the 200, because remember I said 290 minus 90, it gave us 200. Now you're deducting 40,000. So the number of units that are subject to loss, it's 160. do you guys see the holistic view of what's happening here? Why we deduct, why we keep? Maybe let me ask you guys, what do you guys think might be the reason behind you deducting this opening WIP? Why are we deducting it, not subjecting it to the loss, if you think about it? What comes to your mind? What could be the reason? Why do you think that we will not subject it to loss? Yes, Christopher?
Hi, Intabeling.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Also good. Not good at all.
Pardon?
I'm grasping, when it comes to grasping the concept of the wastage point, I am a bit lost.
I'm listening.
Because of, from what I saw from the first one, you said we started from the percentage as determining of our wastage point. And then from there, we took our input of the 90,000. Hence, we deducted it as our input. Then we went to the subject loss of the 200,000.
Join now.
Yeah.
As that
Tawanda,
sorry?
please mute.
Sorry, it's load shedding. Sorry.
Okay, sharp. Christopher, you were saying?
Yes, I'm a bit lost from there. How we came upon to determining the 10%. But what I see is that we were determining the normal loss as estimated as the 10%. But I was hoping if maybe with this one for 35%, if maybe you can explain it again, maybe I could understand it a bit better.
I'm a bit. Can you just try again to say what's confusing you? Maybe just put it in pointers. So point one.
Okay.
What's confusing?
The confusion part comes from now we were determining the 35%. We took the 290. You said you were deducting the 90,000.
Where do you see the 35%, Christopher? Are you talking about the first example or the second one that we did? This one.
Yes, let's go to that one.
Okay. So
yes.
Wastage point, remember, it's where your loss will be, where you're doing your quality assessment.
Okay.
And then normal loss, this 10% is how much of the units that get to this point where you're doing your quality assessment will be lost. So this one is it's the point where you will be doing your quality assessment. And then this one is how much of the units that reach this point, how much of them are we going to lose?
Okay, the unit loss is it always at 10%?
No, we are always estimating it. Sometimes it's 4%, sometimes it's 5%, sometimes it's an estimation. It changes.
So
But for this example, it's at 10%.
Okay.
You were saying?
No, I was just listening as you were explaining. You can continue.
Yeah. So the normal loss estimation, they will tell you, yeah?
Okay. So how did we determine this 40,000? Is it the closing?
Yeah, the closing WIP, they told us how many units. It's 40,000. They told us from the example that we did. Remember, the inputs are here to say that this is a Kenner Worms P2I Limited. These are their units. They told us what the units are. They told us which percentage completion rate do they have. They told us the new units that they've put into this production being 200. So everything we're being told, we're just applying the principles that we've learned on the numbers that they've given us. But we didn't suck the 35% because they told us, yeah, where wastage point is at a 35%.
No, it's fine. Now I'm getting it.
Okay, cool.
Thanks, man.
Cool. All right. So I will then. Are there any questions? Any point where you need clarity? All right. And please, I can't see any hands because I'm projecting. So please feel free to unmute and then speak. Nah? Okay, cool. So I'm gonna move on, taking that you guys understand the principles of keeping and deducting, and also knowing the number of units that are subject to loss. Okay. So in certain instances, I've said it's not always a thing where you're always going to deduct. It might be that the wastage point, they tell us that it's 25%. So, and if you're opening with percentage, it's 15% completed. This is a different example, just a disclaimer. So you ask yourself that, is my percentage, the 15%, is it greater than the 25? No. So as a result, you don't deduct, you keep. And then if your closing WIP is still 80%, we say, is it less than that's 25? No, we keep. So there are instances where your total units that you started with will be subject to this loss. So what I'm trying to illustrate is that sometimes it's both of them you deduct, sometimes you keep the other one you deduct, and sometimes you both keep them away from all of this. So as a result, all your units that you started with are subject to loss. So don't cram and say no. What you need to understand is this principle. Okay, let's do example 2. I want you guys to, let's do it together. I feel like I want you guys to try it. Can you try this? Because sometimes this loss that I've spoken about, you might need to calculate it. So I just want you guys to attempt this example before we get to the solution, just to see that you understand it. Okay. So the following information is available for Coughless Pty Limited. It's a pharmaceutical company. It produces cough syrup, your normal cough syrup that you're used to. Okay. So the units that they give us is that for opening WIP, we've got 10,000 units and they are 15% completed. The new units that we put into the production is 22,000. Closing WIP is 30% completed and it's 6,000 units. Normal loss information that they give you is that 4 out of 5 units, highlighted in yellow, 4 out of 5 units that reach the wastage point are unspoiled and are acceptable quality. Do you guys hear what they're saying? So if you have 5 units, 4 of them are unspoiled and they are acceptable quality. And the wastage point is 25%. Your wastage point loss takes place when the process is 25% complete. So that's your wastage point. So now you are asked to calculate the normal loss that you should include in your output column given this scenario. So I will give you at least, let's say 10 minutes, because it's your first time that you do this. 10 minutes is too long though. Yeah, let's do maybe around 7 minutes. 7 minutes, attempt this question, and then we discuss. try reread if you don't get it, but read and try attempt it. Let me give you 10 minutes for benefit of the doubt, but yeah, because it's your first time that you attempt this. So I'm giving you 10 minutes. Attempt this example. It's an example. And then we discuss after the 10 minutes. But please, please attempt just to make sure that we are all on the same page when it comes to the principles that we just did. So your 10 minutes starts now.
This is how I looked at it. I said, if 1 out of 5 units is spoiled, it means your spoilage level is 20%.
Okay.
So I worked out this way. I said, okay, 20% of the 32,000, which is made up of your open and whip, plus the number of units put into production, gives you 6,400.
Okay. You went
So,
in straight.
Come again?
You went it straight. Did you try apply the rules for when opening whip is what, when closing whip it's late loss? I mean, it's late. I mean, do you deduct? Did you try do that first?
I think I'm in the same boat as Christopher. I think I need to go back to the rules to get into grips with them. I'm still struggling with them, but yeah, in this case, I just approach it that way. That was the easiest I could do.
Okay.
But I still need to work on the rules. I'm sorry.
Very important, very
All right.
important, very important. But thank you for your input. Tawanda, Lina,
Okay.
Christopher,
I,
how did you approach it?
Okay, let me explain how I approached it. Ne? I might be wrong, but like I'm gonna be wrong with pride because I even drew a timeline. First of all, my opening whip is at 50. My opening what you call is at 15%. Ne? And then my wastage point, according to this, is 25%. So
Yes.
is the 15% less or greater than the 25%? I'm like, no, it's not. So I'm gonna keep the opening whip. That was my first point. So hence I did the 10,000, plus then I got to 32,000. With my closing whip is at 30%. And I'm like, is 30% greater than my wastage point? I'm like, yes. If it is greater, then I'm also gonna keep it. And so I did not deduct anything. And then I came to the point that you highlighted in yellow. Yeah, 4 out of 5. Then I made that a percentage. That was 20%. Then I did the 32,000 times 20%, and then I ended up at 6,400.
Great. Thank you, Tawanda. Anyone else would like to tell us how they approached it? So first thing first, calculate. You know what? Before we even get here, thank you for attempting. I appreciate it a lot. It just shows how we all differently look at things and we know which area to improve. But I'm grateful that you guys are actually attempting the question. So thank you for that. And I was going to say that the reason why I ask you, how did you approach it? How did you do it? It's because it gives me a sense, or it will also give you a sense of the structure that you follow. Every single topic that we've been following, if you look at it, there's a structure saying step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 3, do this. This is how you get your final answer. Having a structure always helps you to say, my step 1, let's say for this one, is to say, calculate your physical input. For my physical input, what would I need? That's the question that you ask yourself after knowing what the step says you must do. I'm going to need my input. It's made up of opening whip and put into production. So where are they? And are they given? They are. So you take your 10 and your 12, you get your 32. That's your first step. Second step, calculate the normal size of your, the normal loss percentage, the size of your loss. In certain instances, it's a step, right? Certain instances you ask, in certain instances they will give it to you, like the examples that we've been doing where they gave you the 10%, but in this instance you had to calculate it. So you say 4 out of the 5 are quality, so it means that 1 out of the 5 is actually subject to loss, so it's 20%. So you guys were correct, but I'm just saying It's a step, 20%. Sometimes you're given, sometimes you're not. In this instance, you were not, so you had to calculate. But acknowledging this step indicates that you know that you need to have a normal loss percentage. Then you get into step 3, which is answering the question, because they told you calculate the normal loss that needs to be included in my output column. So that's the point that you come to. Then this is where others might do this line, but like Tawanda, he did this. So you do the same. I'm starting at 0, I'm ending up at 100. Where's where what? So the wastage point, they gave it to me, is 25%. Where's my opening WIP? My opening WIP is 15% complete. Closing, 30%. Then thereafter, you start calculating and saying, do this table. Wastage point is, you can do this table, you might not, but it's up to you. So you say wastage point is at 25. What's my input? I've calculated my input, it's at 32. Then you start the rules that I'm talking, that then you need to know these rules to say, opening WIP, is it greater or equal to my wastage point? No, it's not. Therefore, you have to keep it within this input. If you think about it in terms of the opening WIP, you keep it because it has not, you keep it because it will have to pass the quality assessment point, which is the wastage point. That means that it will be subject to loss if you think about it, because if it's greater, the reason why they say you must deduct it is because it would have experienced loss in the previous cycle and not the current. That's why you have to take it out and make sure that it's not subject to loss. I hope I haven't lost you guys there. I'm just saying, if you're struggling with the rules or making sense, if you're struggling with retaining those rules, try and make sense out of it to say, opening WIP, was it before the quality, will it pass the quality statement or, the quality point, or has it passed that quality point, being this wastage point? If it has passed, you deduct. If it was before, that means that you keep it so that it's subject to this loss, if you think about it. But if I'm confusing you, then stick to what works for you. Yeah. Then closing WIP, was it before or was it after the wastage point? It was after, if you look at it. So we keep it. Closing WIP has its own reasons why we keep it. We're not deducting. It's another way around, so I'm not going to try to explain that one. But is it less than the wastage point? No, so you keep it. Now, as a result, it's 32. So in this instance, say you were like, since you didn't apply, if you did apply, it's great, but you were lucky that in this example that we did, you both hit, and as a result, your unit loss was 6. But luck means that sometimes it might change, right? Because it will depend on the rules, whether you keep, you deduct, or whatever. Where sometimes it might have been that if you followed this, maybe we would have deducted the 10,000 and worked with the 22. But in this instance, you were lucky that all of them were subject to loss, and then you take up that 20%.
I agree 100% with you on that one, because a slight change in the rules, I was fortunate that the rules actually went my way. A slight change in the rules would have resulted in me arriving at a totally wrong answer.
Yes.
But I will work on that. I'll definitely work on that.
Yeah. Cool. But I'm happy with where you guys are. You understand it. So that's great. Now we bring a spin into it. There's another rule. This rule, then we're almost done. There's other rules, guys. Then thereafter, we're going into another example. Okay, cool. Because we still have to do up normal loss, but we're almost there. So just bear with me. Okay. So in the next few minutes, we're now touching normal loss under a first in, first out quantity statement. Okay, so this is where now you have to consider the valuation method of your inventory. First in, first out, or weighted average. Correct. So what are the rules? First in, first out says that if the percentage of completion of your opening WIP is smaller than the wastage point, you need to reduce the units completed from opening inventory by the normal loss in this unit. A mouthful, right? But what they're saying is that if your opening WIP is smaller than the wastage point, you need to reduce your completed opening inventory by the normal loss of these units. Example, opening WIP, the percentage point is the completion point is 60%. Number of units is 150,000. Wastage point, it's 45%. So it means that it's greater. And they give you that the normal loss is 15%. And your inventory valuation is first in, first out. Okay. No worries, Chris. It's okay. Load shedding. I did say stage 5 of 15. Fine. Got your message. So completion point 60%, wastage point it's 45, and your normal loss is 15. How do you do? So scenario 1 says you ask yourself, is the 60% smaller than the 45? No, not. Therefore, you do not reduce your completed units from your opening inventory with the normal loss. The reason for this is that these units will be deducted in the current period normal loss calculation. Okay, I hope you guys understand that one. So first in, first out, it affects the, remember when we were doing the rules, guys, the first time, you will have your input, then you'll have your output. And first in, first out says that you must split it according to opening inventory and current year's production, right? So this rule that we're talking about is for this opening inventory under your output column. So under first in, first out, it's under first in, first out, it's and they're saying that if your completion of this percentage is smaller than the wastage point, you need to deduct your normal loss from the opening inventory. But if it's greater, it's another story. So let's look at here. So this side you ended up not deducting anything. Then under scenario 2, your completion it's 20%. They give you 320, and your wastage point is 45. So it is smaller than the wastage point, and the normal loss is 8%. So what will happen is that you will say, is the 20% smaller? Yes, it is. Therefore, you need to reduce the completed, we're not talking about input, the completed from the opening inventory by this normal loss. The reason for this is that these units will be kept included in this current for the normal loss calculation. So how do you do it? You say normal loss on this 320, it's the 8% multiplied by this, then you say 320 minus that normal loss. Any questions? on this one specifically. Because first in, first out affects your opening inventory under your output column. Do you guys understand? What we were calculating, that's normal loss that you'll have to do for both opening and your what you put into the process. That one says what's subjected to this situation that we just did. I mean the wastage point. Mara, this one, it's for under first in, first out for the completed opening inventory. You need to ask yourself if the percentage is smaller or greater. If it's smaller than the wastage point, you need to deduct that normal loss, calculate that normal loss, and deduct it from the opening completed unit. I think once we do an example, you'll understand. Yeah? But please note, it's another add-on. And then,
Hi, teacher. Can I please just ask Sideru can you just like one more time, please?
Yeah, I want an example. I know.
Oh, okay, sure, sorry.
I know very well, Tawanda. That's why I said we will do a question that will illustrate what we just did. Perfect, I found one. Mara, before we go there, hold on to what I've said because I want to cover abnormal loss too. Ne? Just bear with me. As to how you calculate abnormal loss. Abnormal loss is a balancing figure, and out of your output column. So it would be that your output needs to agree to your input. Yeah? That's just like NBNB. But what you'll do is take your output column total. Then you less the units that are completed and transferred. You less the normal loss. You less the WIP. Then what you mean with that will be your normal loss. So normal loss is a balancing figure. You are trying to reconcile your output column and your input column. So input column is that one where you guys with the example that we were doing is that 32,000. So you'll have to reconcile that 32,000 with this output column. So you'll take that 32, you less what's been completed, you less the normal loss, you less the opening, I mean the closing WIP, and then the balancing figure will be your abnormal. Simple, né? So just know that abnormal loss is a balancing figure. Okay. Just want to see something else. There's also rules around abnormal loss. Rule number 1 and 2, just bear with me with this one. I'm going to come back to this one because it's very important. But I just want to cover abnormal loss. So abnormal loss, when it comes to, yeah, then we do this example. Abnormal loss when it comes to the cost and raw material. Remember on that quantity statement, again, you will have your abnormal loss here. You'll have the column for raw material and then the column for conversion. So for raw material, they say that under for normal loss and abnormal, the equivalent percentage is always 100%. Always it's at 100%. Always put it at 100. Then the conversion costs, that's the one that has rules. So the rules are saying that percentage to use in the conversion costs if your conversion is taking place evenly and the normal loss occurs at the same time. They occur at the same time. So when you're doing your quality assessment, that's when abnormal and normal loss occur at the same time. They say that wastage point to get that percentage. So you use that percentage, whether it was 25%, 35, you use that. Another rule is that if your abnormal loss takes place at a different point in time as your normal loss, use that percentage at that respective event. So it might be that wastage point for normal loss happens at 25, abnormal loss happens at 45. When you are putting your conversion cost, put it at their respective percentage where that loss took place. But if it's at the same point, put them at the same point. That's what they're saying there. Okay, cool. I think then we're done with abnormal. So abnormal loss, the balancing figure, you're reconciling between your output column and your input column by taking that amount from the input minus completed minus normal loss minus closing WIP. The balancing figure will be your abnormal loss. Now I want us to go back to this position, this rule that speaks to opening inventory that will be split. Under your output column, I did say that first in first out says split between opening inventory and what you produced this month, what you completed this month, sorry. And then now this part, don't confuse it with what we were doing. This one was calculating normal loss for the whole thing. Continue with these rules. This one is an add-on to the opening inventory part, where it says that if the completion of your opening WIP is smaller than the wastage point, you need to calculate the normal loss of that WIP and then take it out, deduct that normal loss from your opening inventory. So let's go and see an example that illustrates what I just mentioned. Okay, I want one where there's a percentage because this one's off at the beginning. They are confusing a bit. And I want us to focus on first in, first out. Weighted average, it's not complicated because you don't split, right? So let's go here. Let's start. Losses in the output column of a quantity statement. So please bear with me. Please ask questions if you can, but please bear with me, okay? And then follow. So in our example, it's Luna Lotion Pty Limited. Luna Lotion manufactures shimming body lotion in a single process and uses process costing. Raw materials are added at the beginning of the process, and conversion takes place evenly throughout the process. Great. Normal loss for this year and this month is estimated as 15% of inputs that reach the wastage point. So this is the estimated size. They haven't told us the wastage point. Cost and production are as follows. So your WIP, your opening WIP, they didn't tell you, but you can look at the date that it's at the beginning of the month. Your opening WIP is 30% completed and it's 2,000 units. New units that you put into the production is 23,000. Units that are completed, not put in. Sorry about that. Units that are completed is 16,000. Units that are at the end. The 60%. Then they ask you to prepare a quantity statement for the month of Feb according to the first in, first out. If all, you see, they said all wastage points occurred at 70% complete. how would you approach this? Okay. We're doing V, no? Wastage point is at 70%. So this is how your answer will look like. So let's start at the beginning. Please follow what I'm saying because I will going to give you a question for you to do. So you start by the units. Remember I told you always start with the input units. Calculate your input units. So what do I need as part of my input units? I need my opening WIP. I need what's put into production. We are all on board, right? So you see what I said. You ask yourself, am I given or not? You are given. So you put them in. It's the 2000. It's this 2000. It's this 23. So you have 27,000. I mean 25, sorry. 25,000, right? Done. Then you go into the physical units part for your outputs before you go to equivalent. So now you come to completed from. Because it's first in, first out, I told you, you need to split it according to opening inventory and current production. Different color. Following, right? So let's do the opening inventory portion. For the opening inventory portion, you will need to, let's look at number 2. Again, we know that our opening WIP is 2000. So you need to start by saying, what's my opening WIP completion rate? It's 30%, right? You saw it from 30%. Is it smaller than the wastage point being the 70? The answer is yes, right? So the rule says that if your wastage point, if your opening WIP percentage is smaller than the wastage point, you need to deduct. So you deduct what? You take the 2000, this 2000, multiply it by this 15%, right? And that will give you, let's calculate that. So you'll say 2000 multiplied by 15%. That's 300, right? So you'll take 2000, the number that you put here, you say 2000 minus the 300. That will be your output units. Here it is. Do you see where the rule applies? This is where the rule for first in, first out under completed units applies to say your opening inventory, if your wastage point is before, if your opening WIP is before they do the quality statement, it will be subject to the loss. So you need to apply that loss. Matter if it's greater, you keep it. So you have a 2000 here. Then you still continue with the equivalent rules under first in, first out to say, here you acknowledge the percentage that still needs to be done for you to complete this opening inventory. So it was 30%, but we need 70% of it to be done. So you still put that 70%. But as you can see, this 70%, it's 70% of the 1.7. That's why it's very important that you put this rule that we just did for normal loss ahead of everything that you do. Because if you put 2000 here, your answer here will be wrong. So take out that normal loss and recognize the 1.7. Remember here, the rules still apply that here it's 0%, here it's 70. Cool. Any question from what I just mentioned? Because we're still going to continue with the rest. Is the rule clear to you once you've seen it now being applied? The normal loss rule for opening inventory. Tawan, Christopher, saying Is it a bit clear or is it a bit confusing? Guys?
So we lessing the 15% because in our example they said a normal losses are estimated at 15% of input that reach the wastage point. Yes.
At this point, we are not doing that one that you are used to. The one that you're referring to, it's the normal loss one. It's this one. There's still this one. That's the one that you know where we were doing the rules.
Okay.
This
So-
one, it's a different rule to this one.
On the opening inventory. I guess I'm
Yes.
just struggling with the 15% part. Like, why are we saying 100% less 15%?
No, here they're just saying that you're only going to recognize the 100 minus. You only acknowledging 85%. Because when you say 85%, you're showing that you've already taken out the normal loss. But I'm saying don't do it this way. Just say, all right, opening inventory, you start doing this question. Is my opening WIP percentage smaller than the wastage point? Yes. That means that out of this 2,000, I need to take out 15% of it because it's a normal loss. So you say 2,000 multiplied by 15, that's 300. Then you say 2,000 minus 300, that's your 1.7. Do you get what I'm saying? What I'm saying is that recognize the full number being 2,000 and then say that I need to take out my normal loss, which is the 300, then you have 1.7. Them saying 100 minus 15 is just saying that you are taking into account the normal loss, but the percentage wins. Because what you're saying is that only 85% of these units are complete without a loss. I mean, after a loss, sorry. Am I confusing you, Tawanda? Is it clear?
That makes way much more sense. Yeah. Thanks. So because that 15% is on the input, on the normal loss input, the starting point. Yeah.
But I still say, Tawanda, don't confuse it with this one.
Yeah. Okay.
Please.
Correct.
The
Opening
inventory rule is different from the one for normal loss.
All right. Sharp.
Good. Because first in, first out forces you to say that, fine, you have completed units. Split them between what you've completed for your opening inventory and what you have completed for the current production. Then you'll say, okay, fine, I have my opening inventory. It says before you recognize what you've completed for the opening inventory, were there any losses that we've incurred while you were completing this 2,000 units? And that's when now you have to say yes or no. By saying, yeah, yes, we actually did because this, our percentage was less than this amount. So yes, we did. Okay, how much of it was it? It was 300. Take it out from this 2,000, say 2,000 minus that 300. This is what you've completed after the loss that you just went through. Okay, then we know that the completed, the current production part, it's a balancing figure, as you guys know, under first in, first out. You take your 16,000, you minus the 1.7. 16,000 comes from here. They told you what was completed. So you say 16,000 minus that 1.7 will give you the current production. And we know that the raw material will be at 100, the conversion will be 100. That one is straightforward. So we move on to normal loss, the one that we've been doing, the one that I'm begging you guys, do not confuse it with this one. So now, normal loss, how we calculate it, as usual, I say, what are my inputs? My input is 25,000. Great. Opening WIP. My opening WIP is 30%. My wastage point is 70%. Part of the part of the rules that we were doing was that if my opening WIP percentage is greater or equal my wastage point, I will deduct it from this 25,000, right? That's what we've been doing. And in this instance, is the 30% greater than the 70? No. So I keep it as part of this 25. Then I go to my closing WIP. Is my closing WIP smaller than is my closing WIP, sorry for that, is my closing WIP smaller than the 70%? So is the 40%, where's my closing WIP? Sorry, guys. Closing WIP is 60%. Is my 60% less than the 70? 70 being the wastage point? The answer is yes, it is. And if it is, I will have to deduct it from my input. So you take 25, you minus the 4, then you multiply by the 15%. That will be your normal loss. Do you guys see what I mean by saying do not confuse these two? Because the way this normal loss works, it works under weighted average and first in, first out. Only thing is that first in, first out also adds another rule related to open inventory. Clear? Any questions?
One more time, Tisha.
Right. Normal loss. How we've been doing those as the rules that are normal loss. When you start calculating your normal loss, you start by getting your whole input units being the 25,000, right? Then you start saying, okay, where's my wastage point? It's at 70%. Great. Then you start the whole rule thing of saying, what do I keep? What do I deduct? Start by saying, number one, opening WIP. The rule says that if my percentage of completion of opening WIP is greater than or equal my wastage point, I must deduct it from this input. Then you ask yourself the question, is my 30% being the opening WIP one, is it greater than 70%? No, it's not. Therefore, I'm not deducting this 2,000 from here. I'm keeping the 25. Okay, then I move to the closing WIP. Closing WIP rule says that if the percentage of completion of my closing WIP is smaller than my wastage point, I must deduct it from this 25,000. So you ask yourself, is my 60% smaller than my 70%? Yes, it is. So as a result, I need to deduct 25,000 minus the 4,000. Then the 21,000 being the 25 minus the 4 will be subject to loss. And what is my loss? Is the 15%. This amount, this 3,001, is my normal loss. Any clarity? Is it clear?
Yes.
So after getting, thank you. So after getting this amount, and I'm still saying, please, this normal loss is the same for weighted average, is the same. Do not confuse it with this one. And it's under the equivalent units. We did say your raw material is at 100%, so it's 100%. Either the conversion, you need to put it at the wastage point. So you put the wastage point here, 70%. So you say 70% multiplied by that. That's the amount that you put under conversion cost. Okay. Abnormal loss, it's the balancing figure. And we said, how do we calculate it? You take the 25,000 from your input, You minus what was completed, the 16,000. You minus the normal loss, the 3.1, and you minus your closing WIP. Then the balancing figure will be your abnormal loss. Done. Then raw material 100%, and your conversion cost here will be your wastage point being the 70%. Closing WIP, it's 4,000. Remember, closing WIP is not affected by first in, first out. Raw material 100, and then your conversion cost will be at the completion rate being 60%. Then you add everything, then you're done. Any questions on what we just covered?
Okay, hi.
Yes, Lina.
On the conversion cost, are we always using the percentage of the wastage point on the normal and abnormal loss?
Yes, because that's when this loss will incur. Like that's when you will incur this loss. So yes, both.
Oh, so it's always the percentage on the
Wastage point.
wastage point. Oh, okay. Oh, I wish I didn't submit the assignment. I did it wrong. Okay,
Yes.
all right, thank you.
Okay, so if you guys do understand what we just did, I want us to do an example. But before we do it, how long will you guys take? This question is long. I'm just looking at time. Do you guys mind if we just extend a bit of our time for this thing? Is it fine?
For me in my household, it's fine.
And everyone?
Fine with me.
Okay, cool. Great. Thank you. Thank you, guys. I want us to do, I think you are familiar with this question that we did. Let's do the October exam. Because last time I told you guys when we were doing the question to not look at normal loss. So I think because of time, let's look at normal loss this time. So it's the process costing, and I'm still focusing on first in, first out, because weighted average is straightforward. Weighted average, I can give you as a homework. You'll do it at your spare time, and then next time we can just look at it quickly and make sure that you understand. But I just want you to get this this first in, first out proper, so that you don't confuse the two. Okay, cool. So the question, same as last time, is the exam. So Simple Snacks, I'll read it again with you. Simple Snacks manufactures one product in a single process, and they use process costing. And the information that they gave us is for June. The working process that we have, 1st of Jan, that means that's your opening WIP. It's 20% completed, and your units is 3,000 units, 100,000. 30 June, that's at the end of the month. So that means that's your your closing WIP, 90% completed. And they started, and what was put into the production with 400,000. And then what was completed is 420. Raw materials are added at the beginning of the process, and then your conversion is taking place evenly. Normal loss is estimated to be 4% that reach to the wastage point. Now, and then cost information that. So they're asking you to prepare your first in, first out quantity statement, assuming that wastage point is at the end of the process. At the end of the process at 100%. So now 8 marks means, let me say the minutes, it's 8 multiplied by 1.2. So it means that you have 9 minutes to complete this question. So I'm gonna give you 9 minutes. Please complete it, and then we will mark. That's why I was asking you for extra minutes, and also there's also that extra minute for you to do the assessment. I mean the tutor evaluation. So please also stay behind for that. It's very important. So I'm giving you 9 minutes, and it starts now. Please attempt that question. Only the first in, first out question. The one that I just highlighted. Cool. 9 minutes starts now. Good luck. Guys, let's talk. What was your total input column?
Mine was 700,000.
700,000, which includes the opening WIP of 300.
Yes.
And also what was put into the production, the 400. Fine. And then on the output column, you have to split between your what was completed for opening inventory and also current production. So in terms of the opening inventory, how much did you put there? That's when it all starts now. How much did you put there?
We're talking about the third line, which is completed and transferred, no?
No, the opening inventory.
Oh, my opening inventory. Oh, my opening inventory. Okay.
Yes.
Hey, me.
Yes, so this portion.
Yes.
This is not the solution. I'm just saying skeleton.
Yeah.
This portion, what did you put?
So what I put there ne, is 288,000.
Nice.
How did
you get there? Mm-hmm.
The second point said normal losses are estimated to 4%. And instead of listening to the textbook, I listened to Tisha. I did 300,000 times 4%, which, sorry?
I think someone is not mute. Someone please mute yourself. Lina, please mute. Yeah.
All right. So instead of, so I did the 300,000 times 4%, which was I think like 12,000. Then I less the 12,000 from the 300,000. I landed 28.
Why did you less it? What prompted you to say that I need to take out the loss?
I needed to take out the loss because the percentage of the 4% was less than my wastage point, which was higher than 4%. So I needed to reduce. So it was less. Sorry, it was lower than my wastage point. So I needed to reduce. My bad.
Great.
You're doing for FIFA, right? The one for FIFA.
No, I can't hear you.
I'm asking, because mine, I didn't do the homework now because I did it last time. The first time you gave us the homework. So I was just waiting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For opening, I've put 300,000. I didn't take out the normal loss because the wastage points took place at the end of the process.
Yeah, but remember, the rules that we covered is that for opening inventory, you have to test that your opening WIP percentage being the 20%. You must ask yourself, is it less than the wastage point? If it is, you need to take into account the loss. So in this instance, the 20% is less than the 100% because at the end of the process means 100%. So as a result, you needed to take into account that normal loss, making the 288. Here it is. So opening WIP is 700. Fine, got it. The opening inventory is that 300. Others can say 100 minus the 4%, but I still say take out that loss. So you took it out like Tawanda did, and it's 288. Do you understand? It's because of the rule under first in, first out that says you need to take into account the loss when your opening WIP was before the wastage point. That's what it says. That's why they say the percentage is it less than the wastage point. That means was it before the wastage point? Yes or no? And in this instance, it was before. So that means that it will be subject to the loss of 4%.
Okay, I do understand.
Makes sense. Yeah. Alrighty, thank you. And then, yeah, and then the current production, we know that's the balancing figure. You take your 420, then you minus the 288, and that's a principal mark, as you guys can see. How did you guys calculate the normal loss? What was the process? I want to know that one. Did you guys attempt the normal loss? Guys?
Yes, we attempted the normal loss. I said 700,000 minus the closing week. And then I multiplied by 4%, and then I got 18,400.
Okay. All right. So you took the 700,000, you minus the 240, being the closing WIP. And the reason why is because you firstly started with the opening WIP to say, was my opening WIP the what's this thing? After or before. So now in this instance, the 20% was not greater than the 100%, so you had to keep it. Then you looked at your closing WIP, this 90%, said 90%, is it smaller than the 100%? Yes, it is. So you need to deduct. Hence, 700 minus the 240, and you got the 18,000. So you are correct. Great. Then, sorry, we needed to calculate the abnormal loss. And abnormal loss, we know it's 700 minus what was completed minus the loss, normal loss minus the closing WIP, and the balancing figure, that will be your abnormal loss. I know you guys didn't get a chance to get into the equivalent units, but this is how it looks like. Opening inventory, 0%. I always say show that 0 because you get a principal mark for it. And then here on the 80%, you had to ask yourself, how much more do we still need to do to complete this opening inventory? And it's 80% of the work. So you say 80 multiplied by 288.
Yeah, so that was like my kryptonite, sorry, teacher. That 80%, if you can, the 80% was because that was the 20% completed in the beginning. How did we get that 80%?
100 minus that 20. You ask yourself, how much more do I still need to do to complete my opening inventory?
Oh, using the opening inventory given detail.
Yes, that one.
Okay.
So always ask yourself, when it comes to opening inventory, what more still do we still need to do to complete it? Because they'll tell you it's 20% complete. It's 75%. Okay, but then how much more do we still need to do to complete within this process? That's how you think of it. So that's 80. 100 minus that opening WIP percentage. And then we know current production is always at 100. And then what's next? What's fun here? Normal loss, yes. Raw material is always at 100. And conversion cost, it's the wastage point. As you can see, it's the same also for the abnormal loss. And you get marks for that, you see, because it's a rule. So when you apply that rule, you get principal marks for it, eh? And then your closing WIP, 90% as it was. Any questions? Any clarity needed? But you guys are following. This is where you guys speak, eh?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm glad that you guys are following. I'm glad, I still say I'm truly grateful that you actually attempt the questions. So now I'm giving you time. So thank you for today's class. That was the end of the, what's this process costing. Next time we meet, we're doing standard costing and decision making.